James Corbett, welcome to the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
First thing I wanted to ask, okay, I think I don't believe I have to give my audience an introduction as to who you are. I think everybody knows James Corbett Show. You do amazing work. I think that if you never did anything about except your big oil documentary, you probably contributed more to American history and exposing American history than anyone out there. So anyone who's teaching in a university or anywhere. So I'm going to link to that. I'm going to link to your channel. I think it's just invaluable reporting. So, but what I wanted to start with is you're in Japan. We've heard that the numbers in Japan are lower than anywhere else, that Japan's not even taking this as a pandemic. What's going on there?
Well, so I did a video last week that people might want to check out. It's called How is Japan Reacting to the Crisis? And in that video, I showed people precisely what is happening on the streets of Japan, at least at that point, about a week or so ago. And basically, the point of that was to say, yeah, Japan is not freaking out about this crisis or whatever it is that's unfolding. And I showed that everyone's going about their day-to-day business. There's no social distancing. There's no closures of businesses or anything of that sort. Or at least there wasn't at that time. But I did say in that video, it is precisely because it suits the government's incentives. The government's bread is buttered on the side of pretending that the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games was going to go ahead as planned with international visitors and everything. And they persisted in that long past the point of absurdity, into the point of just, I don't even know what to call it, psychedelia. I don't know how they could have possibly imagined it was going to go ahead. But I did say in that video, precisely when they decide to cancel or postpone the games is when I expect they'll start cracking down. And wouldn't you know it, they decided about a week ago that they're going to postpone the 2020 games, obviously. And that same day, the very same day that I said that, the Tokyo governor comes out and goes, oh, well, it suddenly seems that there's more infections and people aren't being very responsible. You plebs better behave or we might have to lock down. And every day since then, it's gotten progressively worse because they've actually started testing. So, I mean, that was the whole game the whole time, is that Japan there's nothing going on here. Oh, and now they start testing and suddenly, there's a Tokyo hotspot and we're going to have to lock down. Exactly as I said, every authoritarian structure in the world is incentivized to make this crisis as bad as possible and to lock down their populations, because that is what tyrants always want to do. The Japanese government was a very special exception that had the opposite incentive for at least a period of time. But once that incentive went away, now they're just going along with the script. I'm expecting lockdowns to start here in the next week or two.
Wonderful. Well, let me jump on to, I know that you're short on time, so let me go to we've heard the origin story of this virus, and we've heard conflicting stories. Do you have any alternate things that you found out about it in your research about where this has come from?
I do not have anything definitive that I would say at this point. This is the type of thing that, first of all, is completely beyond my specialty. I have never studied virology. I'm not any sort of accredited doctor or scientist of any sort. So I am attempting to adjudicate between differing expert opinions, and like any layman, I have to sort my way through that. But I have a pretty good nose for smelling propaganda, and when I see Nature and other such magazines coming out and saying, oh, this couldn't possibly have been man-made because it's actually too perfect. It's almost too perfect, like we couldn't create such a good bioweapon. That doesn't seem to me to actually be a convincing argument, although that is at least the way they dumbed it down for the layman. So my suspicion would be that this is some sort of bioengineered phenomenon, but I am open to all different positions on this. I really don't know at this point. And this is the type of thing that I'm sure that we could really drill down on, and it could become like a 9/11 truth movement, endlessly scrutinizing every detail of what happened on September 11th, 2001. But to a certain extent, that misses the point of what is happening here, I think, because just like 9/11 truth can get caught endlessly examining every single detail of every single frame of every footage that we have and all of that, and endlessly debating about the pyrotechnics that took place that day, and completely missing the bigger point of what 9/11 was, which was a tyrannical takeover of incredible proportions. It was a shot in the arm for every authoritarian in the world, authoritarian structure that suddenly had a new narrative. It could slap on any of its enemies. You are a terrorist, and we are waging a war on terror. And of course, that could be applied to anyone and everyone that was suspect in any way. Well, in the same sense, I'm sure we can and probably will endlessly analyze this virus, but I think that misses the point of what is happening here, which is, again, as much as 9/11 was an authoritarian power grab, this is orders of magnitude bigger than that. This is the most significant event of our lifetimes, not in my opinion because of the virus, but because of the reaction, the absolute insanity that is taking place around it, which is an on its face, bald-faced power grab, coupled with the, as I've called it, the sinking into the greatest depression, the pricking of the bubble. Once again, I do not think that coronavirus is responsible for the derailing of a perfectly healthy economy. I think that what's happening right now is it is being used as an excuse to prick the bubble that has been inflated, at the very least, over the past decade of central bank fiat funny money nonsense. So it's all of these agendas coming together at the same time, and it's quite overwhelming. And so from that perspective, I think I certainly will continue to delve into the questions of this virus and its origins, but I don't want to miss the bigger picture of what's happening right now, which is a global transformational event.
Right. A lot of people are saying this isn't a pandemic. This is a plandemic. But at this point, that's not even the point. The point is what's happening now. And I know a couple of the things that I'm going to ask you, you've gone over in recent videos, but I still want to go over them with you. One of the first reactions that I had was just a simple, this is going to be a great excuse to institute universal health care, single payer. What do you think the future implications for the medical field going forward is?
I think that probably is true, but I should actually stress, although I very much appreciate your accolades about my American history, I am not American. So as a Canadian in Japan, I'm Canadian by birth, actually. So
I was listening to Rush right before this in your honor. So.
Well, so I'm sure there are profound implications for the American domestic medical system that will come as a result of this. But I see much broader and much darker implications that pertain to the very heart of not just medicine and the way it's practiced, but then how that has implications on the way that we live our lives. We are being constantly told these days that we have entered a new normal. The world has changed forever. Things will never go as they were before. And it doesn't take a genius to see how authoritarian structures will push this in through the medical, with the medical veneer, will push a power grab, the likes of which we have never seen before. Just one slice, one tiny example of that actually I just saw. I think it was yesterday. I think it was today. Oh, I don't know anymore. The days are blending into each other. But I saw it was a Guardian article. Precisely, I said when I first started to see the way that governments were hyperventilating about this, I did say that one of the things I said was this is going to lead the way towards internal passports, internal checkpoints in countries. And I just saw The Guardian coming out with an article, and I can't remember who they were quoting, some medical expert, no doubt, that's saying, yes, one result of this is that we're likely to see internal checkpoints where you're going to have to prove that you have immunity to this virus or the next one or whatever one they come up with, and or the vaccine certificate. And then, of course, you see Bill Gates on his Reddit AMA also saying, we're going to work on developing digital certificates that will be scannable, that you can instantly determine if someone has immunity or has taken the vaccine. These sorts of things are going to be embedded in our daily lives from here on out. Again, regardless of what this particular novel coronavirus does or doesn't do in the coming months, even if it disappeared from the face of the earth, well, we can never face this kind of existential threat to humanity ever again. So we're going to have to make sure that we track, surveil, trace, and ultimately control the movements of every single person on the planet, which is, well, how can you possibly do that without I don't know, putting in an entire identification structure that's going to be biometrically linked. Oh, well, luckily enough, the World Economic Forum is working on precisely that. They've had a program for the past couple of years they've been kicking around that I can't remember the acronym they're using, but something about known traveler ID, something along those lines, that they're trying to roll out right now. And the World Economic Forum, of course, Davos hosts the Davos conference every year, but also hosted that Event 201 conference that people are talking about in the plandemic scenario, where, of course, as I hope your audience knows, back in October of last year, there was a conference hosted by the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Johns Hopkins that was planning for, well, what would we do in the event of a novel coronavirus coming up and derailing the world economy. And so they've been working on all of the structures for this for a very long time. And I want to stress that. That's, I think, one of the things people are obviously, I think for obvious reasons, focusing on Event 201 and the possible ways that could have been a harbinger of things to come and could have been part of the plan to the extent this was a plandemic. But on the broader point, no, these organizations, including the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the World Economic Forum and others, have been hosting conferences, writing papers, sponsoring research along the lines of this sort of pandemic possibility for many years now. This didn't just come out of the blue. This has always been one of the ways that an agenda of complete totalitarianism could be forwarded. And lo and behold, a pandemic of some sort happens, or at least we're told it's happening, so they go all guns blazing, all in on this agenda. Again, whether this was planned, as in this was a planned release of a bioweapon or not, it doesn't really matter from this perspective, in the sense that they are going to use it to push this agenda. And that's the transformation of the medical field, almost the weaponization of the medical field, in terms of collecting data and then obviously using that data to control people's movements and behaviors. And that's going to happen on a technological scale that never could have been even imagined before in human history.
Well, I'm sure you've seen that, like, Texas is barring people from Louisiana coming in. Florida says no New Yorkers, nobody from Louisiana. And Rhode Island is going around searching for people who escaped from New York, and they're trying to send them back. It's an amazing time to be in America, and it just doesn't seem, we have that stupid constitution that no one follows. And that just seems to be some kind of interstate commerce law, a clause kind of just destroying that like they always do. I mean, it is wild. I put out a tweet about 2.5-3 weeks ago saying we're going to have checkpoints. There's going to be checkpoints on the road and on the highways. And it came true. It's just absolutely insane. Going to monetary policy, obviously this is a perfect time with all of these people being unemployed to institute some kind of universal basic income. But the thing that they were talking about more, and they were trying to pass into the bills, was something they were calling the digital dollar. I'm sure you've seen that. I haven't had a chance to read the whole bill yet, so I don't even know if they passed that. But what are the implications of this digital dollar?
From what I understand, the digital dollar language was removed from the final bill, but it is certainly on the record. And as I discussed with James Evan Pilato in New World Next Week last week, it's not like this was just inserted as if Nancy Pelosi was up at midnight trying to feverishly writing off her 1,400-page bill in the week or two it took to draft it, and maybe I'll put something in about digital dollars. No, this has been on the drawing board for a number of years now, or at least for documentably so for at least half a year. And I do document that in my recent episode on the Greatest Depression, where I talk about the CFTC, the former chairman and one of the former, I believe, board members of the CFTC, the Commodities Future Trading Commission, who started a campaign about 6 months ago to move towards a digital dollar. And they use all the buzzwords that you're supposed to use about cryptocurrency and blockchain, but of course it has nothing to do with actually decentralized cryptocurrency and everything to do with a federally managed digital wallet that will essentially be tied to your social credit score at some point. Again, you do not need much of an imagination to understand how this is going to work, and that will be the way in which the government, for example, could deliver their checks, their $1,200 checks that are in the mail, guys. Don't worry about it. Oh, that's going to take weeks. Oh, we can't wait for that to be delivered. Hey, I've got an idea. How about if the Federal Reserve, how about if everyone had a digital wallet with their Federal Reserve member bank that the Fed could inject money into directly, and then you get it instantaneously? Well, that sounds great. Well, that's certainly worth the $1,200 check. I will absolutely do that. And just like that, you could have such a system in place. As I say, I believe that language was removed from the final bill, but it is certainly in the wings, and I'm pretty sure we have not seen the end of the economic calamity that is taking place here. So I'm sure it will be making its way back. And I imagine I don't have to explain to your audience what's so particularly disturbing about that, but the idea, of course, of a quote-unquote cryptocurrency, which of course is nothing of the sort, which is a centrally controlled and administered blockchain tied to your physical identity that will inevitably be tied to your, well, did you get your vaccine? Have you been a good boy? Well, then we'll inject your funds for this month, is of course the nightmare scenario that I think we've all been advocating for avoiding for the entirety of the time we've been talking about these issues and warning people about. Of course, well, these sound like crazy conspiracy theories until you're in a crisis and suddenly they've got a solution. This sounds great. And unfortunately, this isn't just coming to the United States. This is coming all around the globe. I really do. I have, if not poo-pooed the concept of the global reset, I have often thought, well, it's not going to happen all suddenly, all at once. There's going to be a gradual weaning off of the dollar, and it will be replaced as a world reserve by probably a basket of currencies or under an SDR rubric or something like that. I've thought along those lines, but actually, this really does seem like a global reset moment in the currency level and everything else. And I think we're going to start seeing more and more coordinated actions between the central banks and ultimately the institution of some sort of global coordination monetarily. And again, I think everything that we thought about the economic reality we were living in has just been swept from the table. So it's impossible to say exactly what's going to come out of this, but it's not difficult to predict that it will be something that will benefit the authoritarians who have set up this system, and of course the banksters who have always, in some form or other, controlled the monetary system itself.
Well, this also seems to be an attempt to take down small businesses. I mean, it seems like a direct attack while empowering the large corporations, the cronies, Walmart staying open, places like that. But, the small mom and pops are taking a hit. After 2008 and 2009, there was like a mass consolidation in banking, but also in food. I don't think a lot of people realize how many food companies consolidated. How does this consolidation going into the future, how's it going to affect our everyday lives?
Well, whatever you call it, crony capitalism or whatever you call it, this is the absolute epitome of that. And the inevitable result of that is the consolidation of power into fewer and fewer hands. There is no doubt that many of the businesses that have been shuttered as a result of this are not going to be reopening. And to the extent that they are replaced, it will be being replaced by franchises of the big corporations who are being bailed out to the tune of trillions, with all of the various vehicles, fiscal and debt-based vehicles that the Fed has empowered these special purpose vehicles, the SPVs that they're creating, to essentially buy corporate bonds and prop up the corporate system in every way possible. Of course, that's only for the people who are well connected enough to be feeding directly at that trough. So there's no doubt there's going to be a massive consolidation of power and wealth in this collapse, exactly as took place in the Great Depression back in the 30s. Of course, it was the case that wealth wasn't destroyed per se during the Great Depression, so much as power and wealth transferred hands and was consolidated by people in positions to take advantage of the shifting political and economic environment. And no less the case in this case. And I heard Daniel McAdams of the Ron Paul Institute recently relating a story from a friend of his who said, well, I'm a business owner and I make more than $100,000 a year, but less than Boeing. So I'm going to get precisely nothing out of this stimulus that's supposedly being handed down. And that's pretty much the situation for any small or medium-sized business. They're going to get completely shafted by this. And who's going to benefit? The large corporations, of course. That should not be surprising. But as I say, this is the epitome of that system. To a certain extent, though, this is pushing on a string. And I think even assuming that things unfold the way they are unfolding right now, I think we will be surprised to see even some of the big corporations that we thought were unshakable being shaken out of the system at this point. And the type of tectonic moves we're going to see are going to be spectacular, I'm sure, pyrotechnically interesting, but devastating for real human lives. And the unemployment and that we're going to see is going to be off the charts. And that's exactly why I think this is a reset moment. Again, not only for in terms of monetary policy or things of that sort, but bringing in new systems, new structures of control, like a UBI, which will be completely universal. But, as long as you meet certain criteria, that will be the strings that will be attached. And that's the economy that we're moving into right now.
Now, if China knew about this as early as late November, definitely in December, that also means the CIA knew about it. Any kind of intelligence knew about it. They didn't speak up. There's going to be no blowback on the CIA. Do you see the world going after China for this, blaming them, and then trying to take action against them?
Absolutely. I wrote an editorial recently for my International Forecaster editorial called This is What World War III Looks Like. I believe that's what I entitled it, where absolutely one of the narratives that is being inserted into the public consciousness right now is that this is China's fault and we're going to have to blame them. And it's amazing to watch the way propaganda can propagate through the public imagination, and people who have been had their attention focused solely on Russia for the last several years, whether that's people who think that Russia is the font of all evil, or people who think, well, Russia is being unfairly maligned and all of that. Now suddenly all of the attention is turning to China, and now we're seeing people, an incredible amount of hatred and venom and vitriol being stirred up against China. And I place this in a much bigger context. I've done work on this before. For example, I did a podcast episode on China and the New World Order, where I looked at some of the ways that China did not just spring up out of whole cloth in the turn of the century and, suddenly became this economic powerhouse. No, there was a financial infrastructure that was laid through agreements that were worked out going back from the 70s into the 1980s. There was a huge concerted plan, essentially, to make China into the economic juggernaut of the 21st century. And I think it is being placed into a similar sort of relationship that the Soviet Union was back in the Cold War era, where it was being propped up by Lend-Lease and other structures that were actually coming from corporate America. Anthony Sutton has done incredible work, or had done, he's passed away now, but did incredible work on the way that the Cold War was essentially engineered by American Lend-Lease and other transfers of wealth that propped up the Soviet system to be the boogeyman that, of course, enabled the military spending at home, as well as crack down on American liberties because of the Red Scare. I think China is being positioned to be that Red Scare boogeyman of the 21st century. So you're exactly right. I mean, of course, if China really did know, and this really was whatever, a bioweapon release from the Wuhan lab or whatever it was, then the CIA absolutely would have known at that time. In fact, Scott Ritter had a great article up in the American Conservative. I think it was published in the American Conservative recently on this subject about there is an entire intelligence branch that is devoted to getting medical intelligence about breaking viruses and other things that are happening around the world that could affect American security. Where were they? Surely they knew about what was going on and saw the Chinese response and knew what was providing this intelligence to the president, but we have no evidence of what they did or did not provide at this point. So clearly there is more to the story there. But regardless, I think the sort of the pointing of the fingers that China, that this is the Chinese fault and the whipping up of public anger, I see this as a propagandistic opportunity to create the sort of World War III environment that we're being steered into right now. And it's kind of unfortunate. I have a documentary series that I am working on, and the conclusion of that series was going to be, has for several years now, has always been that we are being engineered into the U.S.-China conflict for the 21st century, and I was going to detail that in exquisite detail as I tend to do in my documentaries, but I haven't gotten there yet, and I wish it was already out now so that I could show people, but I really do see this as being the narrative for the 21st century, and I think it's being unveiled to the public right now.
I have two more questions for you. Okay, so I was talking to a gentleman in Switzerland. This was on the 20th, March 20th. He told me that as of the previous day, they were shut down for a month, and they were going to be strict about it. Same thing, southern Italy was doing the same thing right around the same time. The northern Italy had been shut down for a while, but the whole country just went down. Do you see any country that's instituting this kind of reaction, the way they're handling this, where they can actually get blowback from the people because of it?
I think blowback is inevitable, but will it be constructive blowback will be the question, because unfortunately it is an easy game to get the public fighting with each other in various ways, and certainly I think in the American context you can understand the ways that the public has been utterly divided against itself, to the point where any collapse of society, I don't see organized resistance against the authorities so much as I expect there to be widespread violence and chaos at the street level, streets filled with people fighting neighbors fighting neighbors, rather than mounting any sort of resistance to sort of National Guard or military tyranny of any sort. So there may be places in the world where that is more likely to happen, but certainly we are entering a period of chaos, and unless there is some miracle and this all goes away in a few weeks, but assuming it plays out the way we are being told it is going to play out, where at the very least we'll be locked down for a couple of months and then let out for a month and then locked down again and let out again and locked down again, there's no way that will fail to cause widespread distress and widespread looting and panic and chaos and violence. As there are already reports coming out of Sicily right now that there is looting and other things going on, and it's getting more and more desperate as people are running out of money to even buy basic materials and food and what have you. So there's already those reports that are starting to come, and this is really just the beginning of what we are being told to prepare for. And can you imagine how much worse that's going to be in America? So will there be violence and chaos and bloodshed? I have no doubt, unfortunately. But will it be organized against the authoritarian power structures? Maybe in pockets here and there, but on a wider scale, it's difficult to see at this point.
Well, that was my last question. Opinion is there anything positive that can come out of this? I mean, can there be, part of a state or a state that says enough of this, we're not going to put up with this, so we're going to use radical decentralization, even secession, to just say, you can't do this to us. And I'm talking from an American perspective, and I mean, even from European perspective, EU, this is a great time for people to start breaking away from the EU. Do you see any kind of positives coming out of this long term?
I am not going to be falsely positive and optimistic about this. I realize it is a very long shot at this point, barring some sort of miracle. But the only possible ultimate solution to the things that are happening right now is radical, widespread decentralization of absolutely everything, from food production to monetary systems to the economy generally. Everything has to be decentralized, because that is the only thing that ultimately takes the power away from the authoritarians who are on this power grab right now. And generally, I would at least be optimistic in the sense that, yes, there are certainly dark times in human history where authoritarianism and tyranny are on the rise, but then there are times when humanity breaks free and there's renaissance and things move again. And I would like to say, well, maybe it's just part of the cycle, and even if we're heading into the dark times, there will be better times on the other side of that. Unfortunately, we are also now living in technocratic times where the technology of tyranny is such to potentially enslave humanity forever, or even change what humanity means. Now that we're talking about tinkering with the genome and other such things, technology for keeping a population docile has advanced so much far beyond what even Aldous Huxley was warning about 50 years ago when he was giving speeches on the ultimate revolution, talking about the sort of tools that tyrants would have to play with in the future to keep their populations docile. Well, now we're half a century beyond that, or even more at this point, and that's scary to contemplate. So, unfortunately, if we really enter into a dark time of authoritarianism, it is difficult to imagine humanity emerging from the other side in the same way, and that's why I take this as seriously as any existential threat that humanity has faced. I really do think that the coming generation really will decide the game. At any rate, it could be locked down forever, both physically and metaphorically. Or we could hopefully pry some of this back from the tyrants. But the only way to do that is through decentralization. That's why that message has never been more important. And perhaps more people are receptive to hearing these ideas now. I've been trying to ring the alarm on this in various ways for several years now, and have not received a lot of enthusiasm from people out there about the idea of decentralization of the money supply, or food, or entertainment, or really anything. But as I say, it's truly the only way to combat the growing technological tyranny that we're facing. So it's now or never. Either people start investing in the actual solutions to this, or it's game over. And I don't want to soft sell it or put some sort of false positivity on it, because this is truly a fight for the existence of free humanity.
Where can people find your work, James?
I'm at corbettreport.com. That's CORBETT report.com. And I have literally thousands of hours of audio and video and hundreds of articles that I've written over the past 13 years now. It's all 100% completely available for free. And I hope that people who are new to my work, haven't heard me before, will at least use that website as a resource of information, at the very least to help you find links to other information, because I always try to put links and source documents in my show notes so that people can find the original documents and things that I'm citing. I think that's an important part of what it is that I hope to be modeling, one of the ways that we can help to decentralize the spread of information away from the information monopolies that have existed in mass media in times past, towards a more open source approach. So that's what I do at corbettreport.com. I hope people will at least check it out.
Keep up the amazing work that you do, and I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me on.